So I had a lot of these cultural barriers. So when I walked in, the girls were terrified of me, could barely talk, couldn't look at me, looked down at the ground. And I had an interpreter, Saeed, and he said, "I'm so sorry, but they're just terrified of you."
That's a very impressive story. What you're describing is very skilled and precise and refined leadership.
When you go back to the heart of rhetoric, it was finding the words or symbols or communication that would persuade their hearts and minds. They even at the end of that particular deployment, they brought me the sweetest little ring, and it's a silver ring, and it says "Best Friends" in English.
You have a beautiful vision rooted in common sense. You want to inspire children to innovate, to create, to learn, which is going to benefit both them and the community around us. How can and will you employ this same skill set here in the United States, specifically in District 11?
And I don't have all the answers, but I do know it does start, I think you just touched on something,
It's really refreshing to hear that there's people running with this mindset. Michelle Ruehl, thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you.
How are you?
I'm good. It's a Tuesday, so we got through Monday.
Yeah, that's true.
And soccer practice and all the things, so it's a beautiful day.
Well, you're a very respected and busy individual here in the community, so I just want to express gratitude for taking the time out of your day. Come on the show, talk about some relevant topics here in my cozy little studio. I appreciate you being here.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. And just a little bit of background on you, education, work history, and then I'll kind of have you open it up to anything you want to fill in. But you have a Ph.D. in Rhetoric and Writing, 2 master's degrees, one in English, one in psychology, which I'm passionate about. You received your bachelor's from the Air Force Academy in English,
yes,
where you served as a pilot for how long?
Oh, I just retired after 21 years.
21 years. You're a equine specialist focusing on therapeutic riding, which I would love to get into as well. And then you're the founder of the nonprofit that focuses on, is it kind of like, coaching, leadership coaching, things of that nature, called the Parwana Leadership Legacy.
Parwana Leadership Legacy. And the beautiful thing about the word Parwana in Dari, it means butterfly. And it's also the name of a little girl that inspired all of this 15 years ago. I
figured, because I've heard a lot about your story, teaching in Afghanistan, teaching little girls English over there, and I wanted to know if that was related.
Of
so
course.
You just answered it. Awesome. Well, anything you want to fill in there, a little bit of personal background, what you do now, what your interests are, hobbies?
Absolutely. Well, I would be remiss if I didn't start with my 2 little nuggets. So I have a 6-year-old little boy, hi Theodore, and a 9-year-old little girl going on 25, hi Kiki. And then my husband's also a military veteran and pilot. So we met flying together in Afghanistan and out at Beale Air Force Base. So I have my family, and then also we're a family of pet owners with our dogs, our Great Pyrenees, our mutt, our cat. But our family is kind of a go, go, go. However, most of our relatives are still in Michigan.
Okay. And you guys are Michigan fans, I'm sure, going to the game pretty soon.
We're just going to go at it right now. I am a Michigan fan. Go Blue. Always have been. Did the little part of their ROTC program before the academy. Most of my family went there. However, except my husband and my sister's husband both chose to go to Michigan State. So we put them at the other table at Thanksgiving, and they can speak when spoken to. I'm just kidding. But if you know Michigan State, it's a pretty strong rivalry, and it's only an hour away.
Right.
But this weekend, yes, I will be at the big house at the real Michigan.
Yeah, I have some family friends that were Michigan fans, and I don't even follow sports, let alone college football. And they took offense to that I just didn't follow football, let alone their team. So I was already a bad guy. I was like, I don't even know what you're talking about. Sounds very culty to me.
I could even take it one step further. This is kind of funny. The morning of my wedding, I went to the big house and I wore a big poofy fake 80s wedding dress. I went with my best friend Holly, and my brothers and my sister was there. And so the whole family went, and we went to a Michigan game, literally waited until 10 minutes prior to where we had to leave to go to the wedding. So we hopped in the car, tried to get through the traffic to get to this barn wedding. My husband knew the whole time. We were all waiting until the game was over. I had to wash off fake tattoos. It was great. So
what a story.
We established early and often.
Yeah.
Go Blue.
You guys are committed, that's for sure. Well, Just another little tidbit I wanted to touch on. You're passionate about children's education, being a mother, of course. You were in Afghanistan as you were teaching a lot of the little girls English, but you're about to run for the District 11 school board here in Colorado Springs. So I'd love to get into a little bit about, the current education system, what we're seeing as far as trends go, how you feel we can maybe adjust these trends before they get worse. Because I do feel like they are trending a little bit in the wrong direction right now. So how did you kind of come to the decision to run for District 11 school board?
So the District 11 school board run started in about June, but I had been hearing some of the statistics prior to that. I coached 2 soccer teams in the local area, and many of them are D11 students. And so I was hearing different stories from different families and thinking to myself, oh, well, that's a bummer. And then I started to look at some of the scores. So across D11, the reading proficiency is 38% when you look at the standardized testing. That means 38% of students are able to read at grade level, and that's across 23,000 students in 58 schools. 38% piques my interest because I'm an English teacher. Not only did I teach English at the Air Force Academy and higher education, but as you mentioned, I also taught in Afghanistan, Nepal, Tanzania, and Ghana. I have a certification in teaching English as a foreign language, so I've taught younger kids. And so I have seen the spectrum of how children learn English. And even as a second language, my students could still read at a higher rate than 38% proficiency. So that started genuine curiosity. And then I started looking at the math scores, and the math scores are even lower. The most recent has been about 27 to 28% across the district, meaning that's the proficiency level of our students. That concerns me because my most recent job in Washington, D.C. was at the Pentagon, where I studied future warfare, and I did strategic communications. So I'm very familiar with other peer competitors are doing as far as how they teach their children. And I promise you, they're not at a 28% math proficiency level. It's just not happening. So I'm also looking at this as a generational national security issue. So the more questions I asked in my district, the more people said, well, I'm not really sure. And I couldn't quite get the answers. I was asking teachers and parents and board members. And finally, a board seat came open, and I thought, well, you know what? You can complain about it, or you can throw your hat in the ring. So prior to this year, I would not have been able to run for a political office, even though it's nonpartisan, because I was in the military. But now that I have retired, I have a little bit more freedom. I wouldn't say time, but I have the ability to actually run for a political office. So this is my first attempt at it. I'm complete novice at this, don't know what I'm doing other than speaking from the heart, caring about children, and coming from 2 decades of education where I have seen programs work. That's really all I want to bring to D11.
Yeah. Well, I like what you said about it being a generational national defense or national security dilemma. I don't have any children, so I don't have any skin in the game. It's not like I'm saying, my kids deserve a better education. I think more having a special operations background, how is this affecting future generations, national security? How are other countries, possibly enemies, viewing this as far as, taking advantage of this little gap that we have in education and future generations? And it really concerns me because even though I don't have kids, I'm concerned about future generations. Like, we need to continue innovating. We need to continue reading at high levels. We need to continue being creative. And if we're not instilling these educational, priorities into our next generation, I don't know what's going to happen. So
I wish more people would look at it from your point of view, because what we're talking about is one day you and I are going to be elderly and we're going to pass the torch. And when we do that, who are we passing it to? They may be children with great intentions, but have we set them up for success? Can they read and write and do math? And yes, STEM is important. As an English teacher, of course, I think some of the humanities also help ground us. The more technological we get into AI, the more we actually need humanity behind that, making the choices. But if more citizens would be concerned about the leadership and how we're passing this along to our students, I think more people would get involved. Because I door knock. We have to knock on over 10,000 doors as a recommendation to try to meet people and say, please vote for me. And a lot of the questions at the door will be like, well, why should I care? I don't have children in the district, or my children are grown. And my first question is, well, do you pay property taxes? Because yes, of course, you are still paying for the school. Or even if you're renting, you still are a community member. And we still have this generational generation of children that are completely distracted and are not reading and doing math at grade level. And so if more citizens would get involved, that'd be fantastic. It doesn't have to be me on the board, but this go around on November 4th. I hope it will be.
Right. That's what kind of interactions are you having at these door-to-door meetings? I would love to just hear more people's reaction to your kind of mindset behind this.
Sometimes people will open the door and say, thank you so much. I'm glad somebody is concerned. But then the questions that get thrown at me, what would you actually do? And this is where I really have to think through, okay, you can be idealistic and say, this is what I think we should do, and then what's practical. So right now I have this idealistic view of what I think we should do, and I have a couple of points, of course, I'd love to share. But throughout this campaign, I've also been taking copious notes on how would we actually practically, at the tactical level, make this happen. So I'll give you an example. One of my recommendations right now is that we make this wildly big goal that seems unattainable. Right now we're reading at 38% proficiency. I would like to see us raise the bar to about 70% proficiency. And the way you look at it in elementary school levels and middle school is actually called growth. And what growth percentile is looking at is how we compare to how other schools are improving. So you're looking at common peers. And if the other schools are growing and performing a little bit better, are we also doing the same? I happen to be on a board over in D20 of a charter school. And at that charter school, it's only one and it's appointed, so I didn't have to run for office, but I've been doing that for 5 years. And after COVID, we saw a huge dip in some academic performance. So we set a wild goal of 60%. And then we broke down what would we have to do that? We'd have to notice the students who needed early and often intervention. We'd have to help our teachers with resources and targeted professional development, not just go study this because all the teachers are off today studying this, but what do you need in your classroom to help your 4 students who are reading only at first grade level because of COVID? So very targeted development. Once you set that high bar, then you can take your budget and you can match that to, if it doesn't line up with this, maybe we don't get new windows in the gym. Those might be important. Mm-hmm. But right now, if academic achievement is our number one priority and raising the percent growth is our number one priority, then we have to make some tough choices. And so I recommend that we set a high bar, but then we make very targeted approach. Now there's 58 schools. What are we going to do in each school? It's going to be different at Palmer High School than Steele Elementary. So that comes back to local community and understanding what they need. And so that first point of raising the academic proficiency would be, if it doesn't align, then it drops down the priority list. Then the second thing I think we need to do for education is really match our students' talent to workforce demand. In this community, we have a backyard with all these defense contractors who need specific skills. Let's say it's coding. Let's say it's airplane mechanic. Our students don't necessarily need a 2 or a 4-year degree to do that. Mm-hmm. But we don't exactly know what some of these companies in town are looking for. But we could do more internships. We could send our students over there. We could use data-driven analytics to ask companies what they need. And then we could go to each high school and say, are we preparing our students for a certification and or a community college education or the Air Force Academy? What do we need? We can build those pipelines in a place like this where other communities maybe don't have such a strong, growing, robust defense industry and all the others, medicals. Yeah. I'm just using the one that I know. And then the third thing I think we really need to focus on is rebuilding the trust and safety in our schools. As you know, in 1999, we had Columbine happen right up the road. I was at the Air Force Academy doing my tour to kind of come out and see if I wanted to go to school here, if they would take me. And Columbine happened. And I remember standing up at the Air Force Academy at the chapel, and my dad had a tear rolling down his eye. And for him, now that I'm a parent, I understand the grief he was feeling for children an hour away. Well, only a month ago, another school shooting just happened an hour and 15 minutes up the road in Evergreen. 2 decades later. I know some schools have strong, robust security programs like the one my kids go to, and I helped design a security program on the school where I'm a board member right now. Nothing's perfect, but it can always be improved. And so I really think we need to focus on not just physical security and running more exercises with our police, getting more intel, but also the psychological security of our students. How are they feeling? What are they thinking? How come they're not able to focus at school when they don't have their cell phone? Mm-hmm. So really, academic proficiency, and then giving them a hope for a future, seeing a job as the best hope for their future, like my children in Afghanistan. Mm-hmm. And then also having them feel safe and having parents know we can drop you off at school and they're in good hands.
Yeah.
If we did those things, I think at least in our district alone, where the numbers of enrollment have been declining, people are leaving the district to go somewhere else. If we could make this kind of this beacon of hope, and some of the high schools have fantastic programs. I know I'm just kind of going on and on, but let me finish this part. Some of the great things we're doing. Number one is the Pikes Peak Promise, and that is if a student goes to class 90% attendance and has a 2.5 GPA, they can get 60 credits paid for at Pikes Peak State College. I can't imagine having that in Michigan growing up. The opportunity for you show up and you get a 2.5, we're going to send you to 60 credits. That could get you almost a full degree. And so our students, though, when I went to open house at Palmer High School, because I went to all the schools just to get to know the teachers and parents in open house, they only had 62% attendance the first week of school. And I wanted to cry or shake parents or students or families and go, what? You have this opportunity for education that I would have just killed for. Our students around the world, just come to class.
Yeah.
Please come. But there must be a disconnect in what they believe high school can bring. However, that Pikes Peak Promise is just an incredible opportunity. And then 2 of the high schools in particular that I work with are sending their kids for certifications in things like their airplane mechanic or for example, at Mitchell High School, we have partnered with a company I work with, Falcon Aero Lab, and we are retired Air Force pilots and teachers, and we teach them about aviation and about flying. And so Mitchell High School students are able to come build a drone, build a kit plane, learn about aviation, and some of them had their first airplane ride last Wednesday on October 8th. And then at Mitchell High School, they're doing a construction program where there's a Connex box outside, which probably would give you and I a little bit of recoil. But they do construction on this large Connex box, which we had on deployments. And so the students are seeing a hope. They're seeing, oh, I can learn some skills in high school that I can take out vocationally. And I think returning to that vocation might be a sense of hope for D11. But we are doing good things, just we need to do more.
Yeah, more good things and try and, better cut or forego some of the negative things that are happening.
Absolutely.
But what I've gleaned is you want to better curate education for grade school and high school that better prepares them for the industries in their area, that is the greater Colorado Springs area, which will in turn benefit the companies, organizations, and even all the national defense contracting positions that are here. That sounds like a dream. Like that's perfect, right?
But it's possible here. All the ingredients are here in a town where you have defense industry, where you have a large school district. It's a very large school district. And you have companies that are willing, a lot of veteran companies, to give back and do those internships because there's some trust there. You're going to send me a high school kid, but what's the return on investment? And so I think we have all the ingredients to make that work.
Right. I would love to kind of just linger on these statistics real quick. I love analogies. I love using other things to explain what we're talking about. So just take any other industry with a 38% success rate. There's light bulbs lighting this room right now. If I was a light bulb company and only 38% of my light bulbs were staying on for more than, just passing inspections, let's just say, I would lose all clientele. I would have no income anymore. I would have no one purchasing my product, and pretty soon I'd be out of business. So if humans are the product of our country and we're the ones that keep this engine rolling and we're putting out 38% success rate humans, how does that affect America or the country? Or how is this even happening? Like, how is it possible that there's only 38% passing reading at the grade appropriate level, and they're graduating and moving to the next grade?
I'm sure you're asking that rhetorically, but I have a few ideas of what I think has happened just from seeing education around the world. And what I've seen over the last couple of decades is a decline in the way that we teach reading. So it has gone to a very picture-based reading. And I know this, I have a 6-year-old. And a lot of the books will be a picture of a cat. So he knows to say the word cat. But there hasn't been a lot of emphasis on the science of reading, which is back to what we learned, which was phonics. And so what I've been doing in a lot of his books is I'll cover up the pictures and make the poor child spell out K. And he doesn't like it. And it causes a lot of stress. And sometimes he'll cry. And sometimes I'm frustrated. And I'm an English teacher. And I can't even get my 6-year-old inspired. But that gives me empathy. If it's hard for me and it's one of the top things I value and I'm struggling with my own son, I have a lot of empathy for other working parents or not, just parents who are very busy, who maybe have multiple children in the house, who each have different needs. So on the one hand, I feel for parents that have been given a set of resources and books with photos, and that's how their children have been learning, and they don't know any differently. But I also think that there has been some decline in our schools and the way that we're teaching our students to read and write and approach, and some of that has to do with we can't compensate the teachers for the hard work that they do. I know so many teachers that it doesn't end at 3:00. They're there until 9 p.m. Grading and trying to plan for the next day. And they're certainly not compensated for someone else who has a different job in a different industry who would work 15 hours. A lot of them do it for the love of the game, love of the child. But what that means is that we have been underpaying and under-resourcing teachers for almost 3 decades. What do you expect in a system that has parents who don't have the time or resources, teachers who don't have the time or resources, and we have to keep pushing them through? One of my recommendations, and this will not be popular, is that you do not pass 3rd grade unless you can read at a 3rd grade level. And if that means you repeat 3rd grade, you repeat it.
Why do you say that's an unpopular opinion, though? Because to me, that's common sense.
I've been told as I door knock and I say, I do not think that our children should pass 3rd grade. And why do I choose 3rd grade? I think there's a lot of research out there that shows between kindergarten and 3rd grade, and I'll borrow from my friend Bruce Cole. He's a D11 teacher for 18 years, but he says from K through 3, they are learning to read. Beyond 3rd grade, they're reading to learn. How do you take on complex problems in 4th and 5th grade, math problems, social problems? How can you fully comprehend those if your reading comprehension isn't at grade level? You're not fully understanding, and your critical thinking slows down because you're not reading it off the page and understanding the question asked of you. So I think 3rd grade is the breaking point, and we need to say, well, if you're not ready, you repeat it. And if that's not popular and that means your child stays an extra year and is held back, yes, but somebody somewhere has to break the cycle. And that's just one option. I think also we need to reimagine how schools work. I know some of the schools in the local area, they have kids come into school for 3 days, and then they have 2 days where they're either out of school online or they're doing something vocationally where they use their hands, experiential. We have some outdoor schools. There's so many other ways to imagine other than sitting still in a classroom. But then again, if your teacher asks you to sit still in a classroom, that is still a distinct behavior that we need to ask of our citizens. Sit still, respect adults, learn the material. It's not fun. Nobody likes math. Sorry, math teachers. But I still had to learn it, and I needed it for when I was flying airplanes. Yeah. And so it's still something we need to teach our kids, is to sit down and study and do the hard thing. And you can, and inspire them. You can do it. Yeah. But the old model of just sitting there for 5 days and not seeing how it's connected, that has added to the decline. So when you add all of these ingredients together, we have a school system that does not have all the parts working in synergy. And our students are the ones who suffer. Yeah.
And, I remember being a student at 9, 10 years old in 3rd grade, and I was like, why do I need to learn this? I'm never going to use this, blah, 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 blah. But now, being later in life, I have a little more wisdom. I see how learning how to learn made me successful later in life, because while I'm not doing calculus or geometry, I had to know how to solve complex problems. I had to know how to read, articulate, and then make my own opinion based on those readings. So maybe in grade school, we're reading about James and the Giant Peach, but later in life, you're going to need to read other things like documents at work, regulations, things of that nature. I like bringing up this point in psychology, which I'm sure you're familiar with, but between the ages of 2 and 16 for the most part, but later into your early 20s, we're undergoing this ongoing process of synaptogenesis, which is essentially the strengthening and pruning process of certain synapses in our brain. So what I'm thinking of is these generations coming up, the 3rd graders, if they're not being strengthened in this way, if they're not doing the processes, solving the problems, reading, writing, doing math that are strengthening these synapses, they're pruning them. Yeah. So when they think reading is ridiculous and I don't want to do this, I'm never going to have to do long division. It's more than just the long division and the reading. It's creating the synapses in your brain to later in life learn how to solve problems, or at least be more efficient at solving problems. So I think it's a much bigger problem than just, maybe it's not the content they're learning, but it's actually the process of learning. And more than ever, we're seeing technology being very present in children's upbringing. I see 2-year-olds in the grocery store in strollers on iPads bigger than their body, just watching high stimulation, bright, loud cartoons. And I'm just thinking, that's the age when they should be playing with blocks, learning hand-eye coordination, understanding what mommy and daddy is, human connection, feeling, empathy, acceptance, and all those are just going out the window. So what's happening in that synaptogenesis process when they're not going through those things? And are they going to be able to get that back later in life? So like I said, I don't have children. I am very interested in psychology and I want to try and help in this way, but it's a bigger issue than I think we realize, because we're causing permanent change and not enabling these children. Well, we're not setting them up for success. You know, like the light bulb example, 38% of light bulbs work, that business goes it goes bankrupt, it goes out of business. Yes. So what happens?
And I feel like I'm only preaching to the choir, but yes, we're those unpopular hippie parents. We don't let our kids have iPads or cell phones. Smart. They just don't. I have one that they are allowed to use in the middle of the kitchen while we are present for the mandatory math program that they have to do 3 nights a week, and we do it together. We do not allow them to have any electronics, and we are very unpopular with our children, nor when their friends come over are they allowed to. They have to put them up into a box. And so a lot of the friends will complain, we don't want to come over, I'm bored. I'm like, my goodness, I wish I had time to be bored. I'm sure you've read research on how boredom can spark creativity.
For sure.
But you made me laugh about the grocery store because we don't use the iPads. My kids are the ones who are taking a banana and an orange and playing baseball. And I'm not saying that we're good parents.
Nice.
But it does require, yes, it's harder. It is hard to parent. It is hard to get groceries. It is hard to do it quickly when you don't just put them in front of a phone, and that would be a lot easier. But as you mentioned, the synapses are firing, the neural pathways are being built for how do I behave in public? What does it mean? So now we have the kids read us, what does the price tag say on one of the fruits that we're looking at? We have them take it to the counter and run it through the machine, and they're 6 and 9, get the receipt, put in the card, and practice all of that. Maybe not writing checks because they don't really have that anymore, but we still talk to them and show them how to do that. But if the children aren't learning some of these problem solving and critical thinking skills early, you are correct, it starts to wane, and they don't have those available later. And you made me laugh also thinking about how you said in elementary school and you didn't want to study. What am I studying this for? I remember being at the Air Force Academy, 22 years old, 21 years old, studying aero, going, why do I need to do this? Right. What is this for? I'm getting my English degree. And then I have a window crack in Afghanistan while I'm the pilot. And now all of a sudden, it does matter what the air pressure is, how the aircraft is, the aerodynamics of the aircraft. How are we going to get below 18,000 feet to get more oxygen? What are we going to do? Because we can't get below the 22,000 foot mountain. So we're going to have to figure out another aerodynamic path down. Now, all of a sudden, those classes that I don't remember the full content, I remember the discipline, I remember the principles, and it's the same thing for our young kids. They may not love it, but we have to teach them how to survive through the learning process. And even if they don't go to university, they're going to work somewhere and they're going to need to be able to have those skills. So I think we're on the same page there. And I think the message would be to anyone listening, what do I do? You might listen to that and go, yeah, of course, I support that. Well, if you have children or young people, just getting them out and away from electronics and teaching them a good old-fashioned grandpa life lesson may last with them for decades.
The Veterans Voice podcast is sponsored in part by Optum and is produced in the Optum Podcast Studio. Optum offers 13 primary and specialty care clinics located throughout the Pikes Peak region. Their doctors provide quality, patient-centered care backed by industry-leading health services and technology. They're dedicated to helping our community live healthier while keeping care affordable.
Visit optum.com/Colorado to make your appointment today.
I'll lean into this a little bit, but I probably have a pretty extreme point of view. I had 2 jobs in the military, which I was telling you. One was EOD, the military bomb squad, and then special forces, in which I was a medic. So I always needed to know things. I needed to know as much as I could so that I didn't blow myself up and I was able to save the person's life that I was working on. So early in life, 18 was when I was in EOD school, which is crazy to think about. I was so young. We were going out drinking still, though. Anyways, I had a fear of not knowing enough, because if I didn't know something, I didn't know, what battery pack meant, what, lowering systolic and increasing diastolic with a decreased heart rate. What does that actually mean? Are they going into shock? Are they recovering? Like I needed to know so many things, and I've carried that into the rest of my life. And now I'm only 33. I'm in college, and I have that fear of not knowing because, like you said, it might have been ridiculous to learn in the Air Force Academy, but now you're in flight at 30-something thousand feet. You're panicking because your window cracks. I can't imagine. Now you're like sifting through these folders from 10, 20, however long ago that was. Like, I don't remember. So if somehow we can instill into future generations, and this is just me speculating, that you never know what you're going to need, and you should be ever eager to get more information, no matter how silly, whether it's, how to paint, how to change a light bulb, how to change a tire, like all these little things in life that we're not teaching children. You never know what you're going to need. And I wish we can instill that more. I think more than just children need to know that. Like, you need to never stop learning because you never know what you're going to need. But yeah, just hearing you talk about this really freaks me out a little bit. I wish I could just tell someone, like, you have, if you're 12 or in 3rd grade, you're 10, you have 70 more years of life. You never know what you're going to need to know. You're going to be put in so many situations in groups by yourself where you might need to survive. You might need to help others. You might be put in a situation where you just need to recall something and you're not learning the skills now. And that would scare me. So I wish I could somehow, not that this is a good idea, but instill that fear into younger generations. Like, you need to learn stuff. You never know what you're going to need.
Maybe not a sense of fear, maybe a sense of urgency or curiosity, relentless curiosity.
Yeah.
How do we get our kids to that point? And I think curiosity also helps with other issues between cultures, political divide. If we could come at things from wanting to know more and from a place of curiosity, then you're always learning.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that could get me on another tangent, but like hearing other people's opinions gets me so excited. Like, if I don't agree with something, or maybe I have my own opinion and then I hear someone else's opinion and it's different, I get generally curious and excited to hear your perspective. How did you come to that conclusion? Why do you believe that? I'm not arguing with you. We're all so unique and it's so beautiful. So when I hear a different opinion, I don't take it as a threat. I don't take it as a blow to my own ego. I hear another opportunity to learn. I think that's such a beautiful way to look at differing opinions. But
that's why I became a rhetoric teacher, because rhetoric is really about the words, the way we present them, and how we're using our words for persuasion. But it doesn't mean it has to be. Usually when you hear the word rhetoric, it sounds like a negative connotation. But really it gets back to how are we presenting these words and symbols to persuade each other to feel or think a certain way. And there's some real healing work in that too, which was my dissertation was about how to use rhetoric for healing. And that's not just our political divide. It's also within our families. It's also across cultures. Some examples when I was in Afghanistan trying to work across cultures. And I don't know if you want to get into some of that, but
I'd love to. Let's get into your time in Afghanistan, teaching English to little girls.
Yes. I had the opportunity twice to teach, and that wasn't my main mission. I was sent over there in an MC-12 to fly a reconnaissance. The MC-12 is a King Air 350, and it was intended to be a lovely island hopper that doctors and lawyers could take with 12 seats in it. And instead, the military acquired them quickly through an acquisitions process, ripped out all the nice seats, put in top secret monitoring equipment. So we had 2 pilots up front, and then we had a cryptologist in the back that could listen to beeps and squeaks and things, and usually a linguist, someone who could understand the language. And then we had a full motion video operator. So we had a sensor operator. And the four of us would be in this tiny little plane, but it was much cheaper to keep a King Air up continuously 24 hours a day. A lot of the ground troops would think that we were a drone or an RPA at a Creech, and we were just comfy in California. But no, we were there in theater, and we were a manned ISR, intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance aircraft.
I believe I got to fly on a few of those when I was EOD, and they were searching for homemade explosives.
Yes.
They were scanning the ground for heat signatures, and they wanted an EOD technician in there to say, is this a, I won't get into it. I know it's all classified, but yeah, tiny little plane.
A small plane. Army had some as well. And we ended up giving ours over to the Oak City Guard, which just decommissioned, and some to the Army. But for, almost 15 years, this airplane, if it stays up in rotation, we would do 6, 7, 8 hours. Then the next crew would come on, continuous overwatch. And then if you need an airstrike, you would just move over to the side, call in an F-16, an A-10, whatever, come back in for battle damage assessment, and they could go home and save fuel. And so it became this really efficient way to keep eyes in the sky continuously. But what that also meant is that we were doing 6-month rotations, so 6 month on, 6 month off. And we were also pulling people from other airplanes, C-130s, fighter squadron, because we were under ACC and Air Combat Command. But we had to pull people to come through. And so it was an eclectic group. We like to say like island of misfit toys, because we all came from different platforms for this mission. But then we stood up the long-term squadron. So I had the opportunity to come home, go back, come home, go back. And each time I was there, we would fly nighttime missions. You land as the sun's coming up. It's beautiful. You go hit the gym. Okay, now it's 8 a.m. You got a few hours before you go to sleep. And whether it was divine intervention or just my intense curiosity, each time I was always kind of keeping an eye out for education opportunities, because I have that other certification in teaching English as a foreign language, which means you take someone who doesn't know much English at all and you try to relate it to what they need in their culture to learn English. It's a really fascinating way to teach English. And the first time I was there, I just happened to see this sign up at the Chow Hall, the DFAC, that said English teacher wanted. It was an Army-sponsored school, but these girls were going to come in from Kabul or from different villages. Not a lot of information, but I saw the word English teacher. And so I thought, yes, I'm going to do this. I'm going to volunteer in that time of day before I would go to sleep. So it was not part of my squadron. It was something that I saw and just I knew in my heart I had to do. And so I thought this will be so easy. I've done this in Nepal. I've done this in Africa. It'll be easy to just walk into a bunch of little girls. And what I did not think through is that I had to walk in a flight suit, and I also still had the M9. I had the holster on. Oh, by the way, I'm a female and I'm coming into an Afghan community, and I'm a U.S., they can tell I'm a U.S. pilot. And they are very unsure of exactly what we're doing in those airplanes that are flying over their village every night. So I had a lot of these cultural barriers. So when I walked in, the girls were terrified of me, could barely talk, couldn't look at me, look down at the ground. And I had an interpreter, Saeed, and he said, I'm so sorry, but they're just terrified of you. And I thought, me? What? Like, I've taught kids and I'm fun and what can I do? So I tried some jokes. I tried drawing pictures. I tried Disney movies and stories. None of it worked.
And you were going out into the villages.
A lot of this happened not out in the villages. The villages would get buses and they would bring them to certain places. So it'd either be outside Kabul, it would be at Bagram Air Base, it would be a Korean hospital. So they would set up these nodes of where the schools would be. That'll play in later, the other Korean hospital. So essentially, I don't know how they found each bus or walker to come to us. We didn't get that information. I think it was for their own good. And they also wouldn't give our information out. I could only talk through Saeed, which plays into some sad turn of events in 2021. Yeah. But so we kept the connections very specific to who knew what. The girls would show up and they knew a little bit of English. Someone had been teaching them because at this point, girls had been allowed to go to school. So they knew enough English that a kindergartner would probably know. So we could converse, we could draw pictures and talk at a very basic level, but they wanted to know more. They wanted to know enough because they knew that education was their best hope up and out of Taliban rule. So the girls were desperate to learn, but terrified. And so finally, this little girl, the sweetest little girl I think I've ever met, her name was Parwana. She was the tiniest girl in the class, but she came up to me with all of her courage and just said, there's no way that you're getting to us and be able to teach us because we just don't want to learn from you. And I thought, oh, this breaks my heart. But then she said, but we do want to learn. And I said, okay, Parwana, what would you be willing to listen to? And she laughed and said, music, of course. Oh, of course. Who wouldn't want music? And then I had to dig into my family roots. My grandmother was a choir director. My father is a worship pastor in Michigan. And so I thought, okay, what could I do? So I order a guitar, order it to Afghanistan. I don't know if you remember how Amazon would take these contracted planes and bounce around and drop things off. So I get a guitar, I bring it into the classroom, and I ask the girls, I'm like, what would you like to hear? And Parwana, the only one who will talk to me, says that she wants to hear Britney Spears. And this is maybe 5 years after Britney was even popular. Right. So I'm wondering, okay. But then I thought through a list of her songs and none of them seemed culturally appropriate for 8, 9, 10-year-old girls.
Yeah, I guess not.
So then I thought, oh, what else do I know? So I started singing some Beatles songs. So Yellow Submarine, which they found to be hilarious.
Nice.
And they all start laughing and giggling. And then we got into some other children's songs. And we actually even wrote a song for a performance that they did at the end of that semester. And so that's a long way of explaining how much the Afghans love music. But really, when you go back to the heart of rhetoric, it was finding the words or symbols or communication that would persuade their hearts and minds. And once we found a commonality in music, all of a sudden now they're not afraid. They're laughing, they're giggling like children do around the world. And they even at the end of that particular deployment, they brought me the sweetest little ring, and it's a silver ring, and it says best friends in English. So obviously they had gotten that from a soldier or some other American airman somewhere, and they gave that back to me. And it was just so touching that we went from strangers to then best friends. And the sad part about that is when I went back on the next deployment, I thought in my heart, oh, great, this is going to be awesome. I'm going to see my little girls. I'm going to see how much they've learned. And when I went back, the school was shut down, and they said for safety reasons, none of the girls were going to be able to come in to any of the locations. I even offered to go to a different place in Kabul and take an aircraft over, and they just said it's not safe. Little did we know that that was still the best of conditions. Now in 2021, when the withdrawal happened, those same little girls were about 20. They are forbidden to not only go to school and gather, but now music is forbidden. And one of the heartwarming things for me is that even during the withdrawal, even while the girls are in hiding, they have found a way to be rebellious and make music. And there's some underground music and some beautiful videos that have popped up. And I don't know if some of those are my girls, but I smile knowing in their heart that would help keep their spirits and their hope up. So that was the first time I went in as a teacher, and I thought, well, I've figured it out. Now I can teach Afghan children because I've found some kid songs that they love. Well, the next deployment when I went back and the girls' school was closed, I was sad for about a week. And then sure enough, I saw another sign. It was posted, I can't even remember where, maybe at Bagram, but it said contact the Korean hospital and they have students that want to learn English. I didn't even know who the students were, but they said 18 to 22, and they needed to learn English for business and for medical. And those they're not in my wheelhouse, but I know English is a foreign language. I can probably help teach them English that they want to know. This time around, I walk in and it's a vocational school for Afghan men who are 18 to 22, and they all want to learn English for business to be able to either stay in Afghanistan or go work in Kyrgyzstan. And their questions were much more related to business, democracy, insurance, international finance. Again, I was a little intimidated when I saw the list of topics, but I thought they're the same age as the students I teach at the Air Force Academy. So I've got this in the bag. What I didn't think through on this time around, not only did I walk in, I'm in the flight suit, I'm in uniform, I have a gun, and I'm a woman trying to talk to Afghan men. This did not go over well.
I was going to say, how did the men take learning from a woman?
They did not.
Right.
When I walked in fact, some of them walked out. Many of them turned away, moved to a different part of the room. They got upset and were speaking in Dari and in Pashto in very angry terms with the interpreter. So the interpreter came over and talked to me and said, I'm so sorry, this isn't going to work out. And I thought, okay, I tried. And I left that day. He contacted me about a week later and said they couldn't find another English teacher and they would be willing to speak to me if it had certain terms. And so they had terms about what I could say, what I could do, and I had to take off the 9mm and not wear it in the classroom. And I'm thinking, you want me to walk into in a combat zone, a bunch of Afghan men and take off my weapon? No.
That's insane.
Can I negotiate back? And so we negotiated that I could bring it into the back of the classroom and it could go into a locker. So I probably was breaking all sorts of rules, but I did it. They seemed safe enough and they really wanted to learn English. So I was willing to say, okay, fine. What do you want? But again, they were not willing to actually answer my questions and no eye contact or anything like that. And I thought of Parwana and I thought of what she said and I thought of the Afghan people's love for music. And so I finally asked one of the boys in the class there, probably he's about 18, 19, and I asked him, is there anything that you guys would actually connect with or would be agreeable to talk to me about? And I said, what about music? And he looked up at me and he said, fine, Ahmed Zahir. And I was like, oh, I don't know what that means. I don't know what you're saying. And so he said, that's it. I had to go look it up. So I go back to my bunker and back to the whatever spotty internet that we had at the time. And I was able to look it up. And it turns out Ahmed Zahir is this Afghan folk singer. A lot like Elvis, kind of had the long, greasy, Elvis in the later years.
I got to look this up.
He had the 70s flair, kind of long, black, greasy hair. And his music was absolutely beautiful, kind of 70s folk music, ballads, a lot of it in Dari and Pashto. And so I don't understand what he's singing. But I found one song and the chorus was manageable for me in a different language, even though I didn't know it. So I learned this entire song. I go back into the classroom the next day. And I start singing and playing for the guys this Ahmed Zahir song called Tu Goli Naz. And as I'm singing it, they start looking around and I see some laughter and I see someone punch someone else in the shoulder and I see this kind of light in their eyes. And then they finally all scooch closer to me. And one of the students raises his hand and he says, okay, madam, stop. Do you know what you're singing? I'm like, absolutely not. I picked the chorus because the chorus was really easy. And it just goes, la, 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 la. And anyone can sing that. But the verses that I was singing were about this woman and how she smelled like roses. And I wanted to put my nose in her hair and sniff her and smell her. And she was so beautiful. And so they actually looked at me and said, can you do it again? And so we played the song again. And then they started putting in more requests for more music. That's what it took. It took figuring out what students needed and valued, what a culture needed and valued. Even if I looked ridiculous, almost started another international incident by singing about a woman, which is not something they do very often. I feel like they have Katy Perry. And the music was able to touch hearts in a way that thousands of years of cultural differences couldn't do. And so I'm not even sure if it was my training as an English teacher as much as it was what my grandmother taught me as a choir director, which was trying to find the music in people's in their hearts. Once we did that, then we were able to learn any English that they wanted. And one of the most beautiful things about this particular class was they wanted to learn English for democracy. They asked me. This was not the U.S. coming in trying to force democracy. They were desperate and said, can you teach us what these terms mean? What is a republic? What is a democracy? How would that work? How does that work in other countries? Could that ever work here? I'm like, you tell me. I'm not sure. And the way that they wanted to learn that English was really situational. And then that night was the night of their election. So this might have been 2014. And the way the Afghans vote, as I'm sure you know, is they dip their fingers, their thumb in the blue ink, and they put it on a piece of paper. And then those paper ballots have to go to the Capitol to get counted. So my flying mission that night, I was sent out to keep overwatching the airplane of ballot boxes as they were leaving the different villages, so Coast and even up in Mazi. They all had to come down these treacherous roads. And the boxes themselves had to be protected or else the democracy in action would fail. And so, of course, the Taliban was trying to disrupt the supply routes. And so I thought to myself up there, wow, my students are asking about this. The people are voting. This is the Afghans asking for this type of democracy. And here we are supporting it. Like, I think this is actually what we're meant to do. And then when I came back to class and they sat down and they showed me their blue ink on their hands, they were so proud that they were able to vote. And they said, thank you for teaching us what this all means. And I was sort of blown away. Like, I just did what you asked me to do. But now those same students, of course, are living under God knows what in Afghanistan. So
that's a very impressive story. What you're describing is very skilled and precise and refined leadership skills. I think when people lead, it's really easy to get frustrated when you're unable to communicate your point. When you're trying to lead a group of individuals or advise a group of individuals, if they don't take to the first or second attempt, it's really easy to just give up because it feels like it's our fault and we don't want to admit that. And in reality, if people aren't taken to what you're saying, it is your fault in a way. And maybe it's a cultural thing, like it's your gender, you can't really help that, but that's just their ideology, as skewed as we may think it is. But using music as a common ground to get both the little girls and the military-aged males in Afghanistan to take to your side and listen to you, that's so impressive. So my mind immediately goes to how can and will you employ this same skill set here in the United States, specifically in District 11?
I think that's where it all stemmed. I think I couldn't sleep at night thinking about how the kids in my own backyard were struggling. Here I was so willing to try anything and everything to get children somewhere else to learn. I'm like, why don't I have that same fire for my own kids in my own community? I should. And as I looked around, it was almost like I couldn't unsee it once I thought about that. And I don't have all the answers, but I do know it does start. I think you just touched on something is the leadership development. And I've been so fortunate to work with a couple of organizations that are really focused on if we can teach the kids leadership development on their own, some of these other natural learning challenges might fall into place when peers lead peers. And one example of that would be, as I mentioned a week and a half ago, we were teaching an aviation course to some Mitchell and Doherty high school students, and some of them were part of the junior ROTC program. So they already had a leadership bent, but some of the things we were able to talk to them about, including the superintendent, Mike Gall was there. He's a former Air Force pilot as well. And some of the things we were able to explain to the students were these traits that we know from aviation. It's not just the aerodynamics. Sure, we drew on the board and we were drawing airplanes and things, but we're like, it's about the leadership in the aircraft and then with your community and with your squadron. And you guys already have some of those seeds planted. But what we really focused on was, yes, we're taking you up in the air. You're going to see beautiful sights. You're going to see the Royal Gorge. You're going to see Pikes Peak. But what if you were the leaders in your own school? You already have it sort of available to you as your junior ROTC program, but what if the leadership poured out of you as a peer so that you tell your other fellow students, hey, come to class and you can get this Pikes Peak promise. You can get college credit. You can get 60 credits, actually. What if the Doherty students were able to say, we're learning how to fly. You guys should try this too. Words from adults are never going to be as popular as if we can teach them to be leaders amongst their peers. And so part of what we're doing at Falcon Aero Lab, it's like a mini Air Force Academy. Yes, we're teaching them STEM, but we're also teaching them, and Mark Hyatt, I give him the credit for starting this. Colonel Hyatt started the program with his wife. But what they wanted to do was find veterans and find former military members to then pour back into these kids in a way where, yes, it started with homeschool, so we're teaching homeschool kids math. But now we're taking the character and leadership development that we learned and that we taught at the Air Force Academy, and now we're trying to teach those to homeschool and to the local high schools and middle schools. And if our generation can then mentor and teach them leadership, math becomes a tool for any leadership skill. It's not actually about the subject. It's about how do we mentor, how do we lead, how do we tutor? When you see another student struggling, how do you bring them along with you and leave no man behind? So Falcon Aero Lab really has this tiny niche in the market to inspire high school and middle school kids to be able to then want to learn leadership along with their STEM, which would be fantastic to get both. And then also my own nonprofit, Parwana Leadership Legacy, I started off just doing camps out of fun. As you mentioned earlier, I do work in equine therapy. So I'm certified to teach people how to ride horses, and it can be physical or it could be mental. But any sort of healing that they need through horses, I've been doing that for decades, and that started way back in Michigan, and I've been able to do it at every military base that I've moved to. But by working with children who also have these other challenges, I was able to then start a nonprofit where I could bring in horses. I could also bring in music. And what I realized, again, is it's not the modality. What we're trying to teach kids is leadership to each other, amongst their peers, within their family, within their community. And you can do that through any vehicle that you have available to you. And so I started that in honor of Parwana, because she was this little leader, this little woman in Afghanistan that was able to speak her truth to me and get me to try something like music. But then what I noticed once I started the nonprofit, I kept moving around and it was difficult to build community relationships, was why don't I start partnering? Why don't I start partnering with other community groups that are doing leadership? And then we can make this even stronger, much like Mount Carmel does, right? It's a center where we can bring synergy. All these people who are doing really good things for veterans. So I started thinking, how can we bring together community members who are doing really good things to teach the next generation of leaders? And that sort of leads me into, I also work with a company called Afterburner, and it started off as Jim Murphy, fighter pilot, almost all fighter pilots, and teaching executive seminars and giving keynotes about leadership. What it has evolved into, and beautifully so, is it's not just fighter, it can be special operations, it can be like MC-12s like me, it's military leaders and special operators who have had to make hard decisions. We just created a new leadership arm of this, and of that leadership branch, the Flawless Leadership Program. Now we're able to take all the leadership lessons that we've learned and take them out into community, business, organization. And my dream has always been middle schools and high schools. If we can get us into a high school, talk to a group of kids about our fears, what we faced, the failures in Afghanistan, feeling like I'm a failure and they won't talk to me. But then we tell them, but you can do this too here in your own city. You don't have to go overseas to face the challenges. The kids are facing so many things these days. So I guess my new mission or my new passion now is, yes, education and improving particularly a school system, but it's broader than that. It's getting our kids to want to take the torch when we are gone and be this next generation of leaders. I think education plays a huge part of that. But it's also letting them know that we believe in them. And I know we were poured into in Gen X. How do we get now our kids to feel that same sense of urgency, of curiosity, to become the next generation of leaders?
Take their phones away.
Yes.
In short, that's my answer. But you have a beautiful vision rooted in common sense. You want to inspire children to innovate, to create, to learn, which is going to benefit both them and the community around us. And it's really refreshing to hear that there's people running with this mindset, because I just hear more about, control and restrictions and, kids are out of control, so we need to just control them more. No, we need to inspire them more. They're needing to be controlled because they don't feel like they're able to express themselves. They're not learning. Yes. They're not innovating. They're not leading into their purpose. They're not discovering their purpose in life. They're being told what their purpose is. And so this has just been really refreshing to hear from you. You
just reminded me of something on Wednesday when the kids went up in the airplane and they first came in, they were heads down looking at their cell phones. When they finally got ready to go out to the airplane and they came back in, huge smiles on their faces, no cell phones to be seen, laughing and joking and saying that was the coolest thing or the most beautiful thing they'd ever seen in their lives. And I thought that's the open classroom. That was the classroom in the sky. And public education, being able to give that to them is such a gift. And there's only more of that possible if we can get more schools and more districts interested in doing this type of experiential learning. Our kids are naturally going to feel inspired. We just need more of that.
We need more of it. Maybe there'll be something that happens in the future where the internet goes down for a period of time, and then we can't help but disconnect and connect with each other. I don't know if that would happen.
We tried that at one of the bases doing a cyber down day, and it was just a bunch of fussy officers getting all upset because they didn't have their computers. But I thought, man, we should do this more and at random, and you don't know what happens when your car GPS doesn't work. Do you remember how to stop at a gas station and ask for a map?
That happened to me the other week. Someone stopped and asked me for directions in old Colorado City, and I thought they were joking. Like and my instinct was just, can you look it up on your phone? But I went out of my way to explain where it was. And I was like, this was kind of cool. Like that used to happen all the time, but now we've lost that. But I don't know, they were an older couple. So, not brainwashed by our devices, but this has been a very productive conversation. Michelle, I appreciate you coming on. What do you have kind of coming up next? What are your big interests moving forward into the end of the year?
Well, in addition to this particular school board run and my soccer season coming to an end, it's really taking these couple of other businesses that we've started to develop. So the leadership program with Afterburner is really picking up, and I would love to grow that into the schools and communities. So right now we're still at the organizational level, and my dream for 2026 is that I am able to come into the high schools across Colorado And we bring that leadership message in for either, it could be leadership development, or it could also just be school assemblies. But it's time to start directly speaking to our kids and giving them that sense of hope in a way where they see adults who care enough to come in and let them know that we understand that it has been difficult for you. You were handed a phone or an iPad when you were born. And actually at your fingertips, you have the ability to use AI in a way that I don't completely understand. I don't even really touch it. They are going to be able to come up with solutions to things like maybe cancer that we couldn't. But what I hope we can do, and in this endeavor, getting into the schools and growing this particular business, is that yes, they use it as a tool, but in an ethical tool, and they still have that critical thinking skill. And I still want the kids to feel inspired that they are going to take over for us. And and that touches a little bit on the mental health side that we didn't quite get into, but teens right now are having a high epidemic of mental health episodes, showing up at ERs with mental health episodes. And as you know, it's prevalent in the veteran community too. And so what I would like to do is rewind before we get into the mental health stress, meet these kids where they're at so we can stop it before it gets to the point of no return. I don't want a generation of children that are medicated for depression or children that feel that suicide's the only way out. I want children to know that the adults around them care enough to come in a preventative way. And so I think if I can keep building that particular business and be able to talk to kids before it gets worse, that's where we can meet them. And same thing for some of our veteran programs. I also work in healing spaces for alternative medicine with veteran suicide and mental health. And so that's the other passion I have is I won't sleep at night until we come up with more ways to help veterans come forward when we're feeling the stress and the mental health stress. And I know there's been years of work of breaking down the stigma, and we all say that that's happening. But in reality, especially in the aviation community, if you come forward and you honestly talk about what 20 years of war has done to us, we're the next Vietnam generation. Mm-hmm. When it really comes down to it, and I have sat with veterans in healing ceremonies recently that are broken and hiding it and barely keeping it together. And that cascades down to the family and to the children that we're talking about. And so the other endeavor I'm just really passionate about is being part of the healing space and the research around saving lives before people feel that suicide's the only way out.
Yeah. You mentioned like teen mental health, but just mental health in general. I'd love to hear your opinion on why you think we've kind of run into this mental health crisis over the past 5 years, has it been 10 years maybe?
About 10 years. And you ask yourself, we're in the freest, most beautiful nation of the most wealth that has ever existed on the planet. Yet we have the highest incident of young people's mental health and veteran mental health. And what is the disconnect? We have everything, but we're in anguish. There's something that's missing. And I really think it comes back to connection. Years ago, your community was your connection point, and you see other cultures that have a very strong connection point. We've been working on an adoption from a little girl in Honduras, and I can tell you the Honduran culture is very much grandmother, great-grandmother. They're all in the home, and they're all in one compound. Same thing in Afghanistan, the compounds of families. I taught in Tanzania and Ghana, and it would be 8 different families all living in one area together. I mean, right now it's me and my husband, and our family is 2,000 miles away. Mm-hmm. We can call on Sundays, sure, but the disconnect between not only the nuclear family, but then the support around us. And then you look at the veteran network. When you used to have your special operations, your bro network, when I had my squadron, it was like ride or die together. And now all of a sudden we might get together for a 10-year reunion or a 20-year reunion. That sense of community that was so strong is now abolished. And then there's this question, at least for U.S. veterans, for what did it all mean for 2 decades? Why are we all wearing these KAA bracelets? What was it for? And my girls can't even go to school. And those questions we can't answer them right now. We did our best with what we could at the time. But I think that existential crisis, when you come up against a crisis, and this was some of my dissertation work, when you have a loss of meaning and you have a loss of connection and you don't have a way to come together in community to process it, then you internalize it. And that becomes self-sabotage, that becomes mental health sabotage, because you're trying to take it all on yourself. And I had a young man come in when I was working in the White House the night of the Afghan withdrawal. and he was a Army captain. He walked in and he said, "Can I talk to you?" And I said, "Yeah, absolutely." Maybe he felt comfortable. I was I think a lieutenant colonel at the time. But he knew I was open and studied some mental health. And he just broke down in tears and said, "What do I do? I promised my interpreter, who was embedded with me, that we would get him out and he'd get a visa. And now his visa that he did have, the SIV, was burned by the Taliban. We have no way to get him out. I can't contact him. I let him down." And the moral injury. So now we're talking about existential. Why are we here? What are we doing? Moral injury of what I've done. That cascades down to family, and we don't have the connection. We don't have the community. That's the recipe for internal pain that feels like it can only be either self-medicated through alcohol and we're all guilty of finding ways to self-medicate, or you feel like it's a relief. If I remove myself from this situation, I'm actually a relief to the people around me because I'm a burden. And I feel like if we could, and this is what my research just started to scratch the surface on, and I just used what I know, which is English and theater. And so I was studying rhetoric. What if we went back to what the Greeks used to do in community? They used to come together, all together in the big giant spaces, and they had been at war after 40 years. And at that point, when you look at General Sophocles, he wrote all sorts of plays. He was a general, an Athenian general. And he brought all of his guys together, thousands together, to watch plays like Ajax. Ajax is a play about a warrior who took his own life, and his wife has to come in and see that he slaughtered animals and himself. And she's screaming and going, "What could we have done?" And the hint in the play is that we could have surrounded him more and said it's okay. But a great warrior couldn't admit that he was in pain. And I'll just give one shout out to Theater of War and Brian Dories, who works in this space. And he allowed me to study for 3 years, study how he went to military bases, and he brought Greek plays and he used it to open dialogue. And he let me study the dialogue that was actually happening. That's what I measured. What were soldiers and airmen and Marines and what was everyone saying when they came up to the microphone afterwards? And was it actually helping? And that's hard to measure. But what I concluded was when you have a loss of meaning and a sense of why am I here and what does it all mean, and you don't have community, you're going to start sliding down in a negative pattern. If you can intervene with rhetorical means, theater, communication like we're doing right now, if you can intervene before someone thinks they have no other option, there is a chance to restore one of those pieces, which is connection or meaning or an existence, an existential question. And if you can slow down one of those, and you can do it in community, there is a chance that you can help with the mental health. This is true with our soldiers. This is true in military, but this is also true with our teens. If you think about our teens, they're in an isolated world, a digital world, alone, looking at their Instagram. That is not the life that God intended us to have. It's not the community.
It's not a real community.
They're living in an island of isolation. So our veterans are feeling that, our teens are feeling that, and no wonder there's confusion and suffering. So I think what you're doing just by creating a community space and inviting anyone to come and listen and talk is the first step. And then I think relentless, aggressive pursuit of our buddies, our squadron mates, our teens, telling people, I'm not going to leave you behind and I'm still here. And even if you want to isolate yourself, I'm here. And just not letting that go is one of the things we can do. Don't let our teens isolate and go into a room. Hug them, hold them, invite them into your space and take away the phone. Same thing with our veteran community.
In your study of psychology, did you come across self-determination theory by chance a little bit?
I did. I didn't weave that into mine per se, but tell me more.
Yeah, I've been studying it recently, just kind of on the side, aside from my studies. But what you're hinting at is this idea of community, right? So self-determination theory talks about how we have, as humans, an innate sense or an innate set of psychological needs. And when those needs are met, it enables us to flourish and be happy and avoid mental health crises. So these psychological needs, he breaks them down into 3. Richard Ryan, who was the founder of it, it's autonomy. So feeling like we are in charge of our own life, we're making decisions and seeing them play out rather than having decisions made to us, which is common now with work and everything else. So that feeling of autonomy is one. The second one is feeling competent. So able to solve problems, you have skills, you see yourself insert some sort of intelligence to solve a problem. So feeling autonomous competent. And then the last one is belonging. It's relatedness. So feeling that mutual respect, whether it's one-on-one or in a community or with a greater idea. And if those three innate psychological needs are met, that's the secret sauce to flourishing and feeling happy and having a sense of purpose. So I don't think our purpose comes from a job or a relationship or anything. It's something quantifiable within ourselves. And I think when I really reside with this theory, when those three needs are met, I think we can all achieve that. So what we've described here today, we're seeing lower levels of competence, not being disrespectful. It's just facts. We have less autonomy because we're trying to control future generations. We're trying to make all the decisions for them so they're not feeling autonomous, and they don't feel a real sense of belonging because they're stuck in their phones. And where they feel like they're a part of this huge community, social media really just makes you see community and other people as competition. Like whether we admit it or not, everyone looks at how many likes or views things have, and it's just turned that sense of belonging, that relatable aspect of human connection, into a competition. So I think if we go back to this theory, which was founded in 1970, we're avoiding all three of those innate psychological needs. I'd love to hear your thought on this.
One thought I have on this, I've heard criticism to the theory being that what about people who, when you look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, if they don't have their food, water, and shelter, it's a privilege to even get to the point where you get to fuss about belonging. My counter argument to that is, yes, that is true. Over in Afghanistan and some of the places that I saw in Ghana, they did not have the food, water, shelter, safety. So they didn't get to the chance of self-actualization. Like that wasn't available to them. The problem is in the United States, and I will face some criticism for this, we do have access to a lot of food, water, and shelter. I am 100%, I understand that there are children on Nevada right now who are homeless. I am not saying that everyone's basic needs are met, but for the most part, as a culture, if we choose to accept the help that's out there, our basic needs are met. So then we do have the honor of then considering our psychological needs. And in that case, in our culture, we should be focusing a lot more on the three, especially on the belonging. But even if you were to take that counter argument and look at it another way, you could say that you could flip that and go, whether or not you have food, water, or shelter, there are also very resilient cultures that have been able to then flip it and focus on community, belonging, and feeling like they're competent and autonomous. If I feel like I can go gather water, I'm just giving an example of one of the places where I taught. If they feel like they have the ability and competence to go gather clean water and bring it back to a community and belonging, that is fulfilling one of those other basic needs. So it's almost like they need to run in parallel.
Definitely.
But it's a continual question of which needs are we trying to meet. But at least for the people that we can touch in our circles, if we can help them with that belonging piece, I think that cuts across the span of all human psychological or physical. You could be suffering with no food in a POW camp like John McCain, but the belonging is what kept him feeling like he had hope.
Yeah, direction. Yeah, I think equally we have physical needs and psychological needs, and I think this theory talks mostly just about psychological needs, implying that physical needs are also met. So I couldn't agree more. But I appreciate you coming on. This is a great conversation. I'll talk your ear off. I know you got a big meeting after this, but I like to close up every episode usually with the guest giving advice to someone who would relate to them. Usually it's, what advice would you give to someone struggling? But maybe in your case, as a mother, a wife, a parent, what advice would you give to another parent that may be struggling with their kids and they see this technology craze maybe taking over and they're struggling to, teach them the ways? They're losing inspiration. How would you kind of talk to them?
I would say it is hard. It is hard when I have to tell my kids you can't have a phone or an iPad and they really just want to watch whatever the show is. It takes a lot of, I wouldn't say sacrifice. I love playing with my kids, but there are times when I want to sit on the couch and I want them to watch a cartoon. And instead I have to tell myself, if I invest 10 minutes right now to go throw the football with my son and with my daughter, that will mean more to them than an hour or two of us watching a movie. Let's just see if we can go do it. It's hard. They fuss, they cry. There's no shoes. There's no socks. It's getting dark out. It's cold. My ankle hurts. I'm old. Like, there are a lot of things in fussing and complaining, but once we get out there and we're throwing the football, and we just did this a couple nights ago, and we're tackling and the leaves are falling, and I think to myself, this is worth it. The pain of getting 15 minutes ready for 5 minutes of connection and community with my children, I would just tell parents, if you can get through that the whining, and they're not going to like it, and they might be mad at you, you love them through it, and you remind yourself, no, this is worth it, even if it's only 10 minutes with my kids where we're doing something in community that doesn't have to do with other people's opinion and digital technology. And I'm not saying digital stuff is wrong. If you want to play a video game with your child and that's your community, that's fine. But intentional connection, because if we can rebuild that connection, they're going to choose maybe to come to you more, put the phone down more, ask you more about your day too. But they need to feel that it's a trusting, safe place and that we're not too busy. And I'm just as guilty as every parent. I'm busy too. And so I have to write it on my hand, write a note to myself, be present with your children because they're going to be gone soon.
Yeah. That's the easy button. They've made it real easy to just keep our kids distracted, and it's hard to maintain that connection.
Yeah.
But that was great advice. I appreciate it. And thanks again for coming on the podcast. Appreciate all the work you've done, and I applaud you for everything you've done up to this point. Just keep going, because we need voices like yours out there. So more than happy to host you anytime.
Well, thank you. This is a great afternoon. Enjoyed. Thank you.
All right. Take care, Michelle.
Thanks.